Batman the Caped Crusader is now on Amazon Prime. All 10 episodes of the first season. I believe it has already been picked up for a second season. That was kind of established out the gate. Amazon bought 2 seasons apparently. This is a series that it's got a lot of producers on it, a lot of executive producers. It's one of them that could leave you wondering just exactly who's in charge, but the showrunner is Bruce Timm. So this is the guy behind the original Batman, the animated series. Knowing that fact, I was very curious. I was very excited. I was very hopeful. There's other names on there in the producer side, like J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves. Your big name kind of people that just how much input they actually had, I don't know. But as I say, the main showrunner is Bruce Timm. He's the spearhead behind it all. With that in mind, let's just kind of talk about the elephant in the room, which is obviously Batman, the animated series. You get any Batman show, animated Batman show that has Bruce Timm as its showrunner, then the obvious comparison is going to be Batman, the animated series. That's the gold standard. That's what it's going to be measured by. So do pardon me if I do, throughout this review, keep referring and comparing back to Batman the animated series. I think it's unavoidable. We all know it's there. We all know we're going to be thinking about it and comparing it. Now I'm going to review this whole season. I'm going to go through each episode. I'll say a little bit about each episode, and then at the side here I will give you my grades as we go for each episode, followed at the end by an overall season average score. So the first episode in the series is In Treacherous Waters, and it is a Penguin episode. It's an introductory episode to the show. It gives us the style, it gives us the tone, it introduces us to our new Batman, who isn't, sadly, Kevin Conroy, rest in peace. But yeah, it also introduces us to, inexplicably, a gender-swapped Penguin. So this had me worried. This had me worried for the show in general, given it's the first episode and we've suddenly got a gender swap. And I was just like, oh dear Lord, no, why? And look, I'm not totally adverse to gender swapping characters. It can be done, I think, and you can do something with that. But they do nothing with it. Like there's literally no point to the gender swap. It adds no ulterior value. There's literally nothing. I'm sat there, I'm thinking, an 85-year-old character has always been male, and the culture we live in, this is the best you can do, is just take an old character that's been around for so long and just gender swap them, and then add nothing as a result of that gender swap. Like, do nothing with it. It made no sense to me, and it stuck out like a sore thumb, and it just bugged me. It's the way I feel. That's just my honest gut reaction. It bugged me. Now, that aside, like, had they not gender swapped Penguin and they just kept it as Penguin, like, there's pretty much not a right lot you would change about the episode. You could just keep it a male Penguin. And it's solid. It doesn't compare to the likes of the pilot episode of Batman the Animated Series. There you go. There's my first comparison, which, they put everything into that pilot episode. So that was like a Man-Bat episode in the Batman the Animated Series, and it just allowed them so much range with the animation. And I feel like the animation in Batman the Animated Series, across the board really, is a bit more fluid. Like when it's at its best, compared with when this is at its best, the animation in Batman the Animated Series was a lot more fluid. It felt a bit more mature in places. Like there's the animation here, the character designs, there's a lot of like bold, kind of thick eyebrows and that kind of thing. The lines are thicker, and it has the effect of appearing more kiddie-like, like kid-friendly kind of thing, which the show itself is far from being. I'll say that much. Don't instantly think that because this is an animated Batman show that your kids should be watching it, because there's things in it that personally I don't think should be in a kids animated Batman show. As far as setting out the stall, as far as giving us the tone, the first episode does a pretty decent job. I like the animation style. Again, not as much as Batman the Animated Series, but I do like it. I like that they seem to be focusing more on the police, the attorneys, the people who are on that side of the law. Batman almost feels secondary, and I know to some people that might be like, prick your ears up, kind of raise your eyebrows, like what you do. But in a good way, we get to focus on like everyone on the right side of the law a bit. Even those who are in the police system, like Bullock and Flass, who are dodgy cops, bent cops. We focus on them a fair bit throughout this show, and so I like that we're doing that. I like that we stick with them, and it's not just about who's the colourful villain of the week, and let's focus all of our attention on them. In that regard, it's pretty well rounded. I like the 1940s aesthetic. Now, it's never quite clear what time period we're in here, and that was always the case with Batman the Animated Series as well. It's why it dates so well, is that you can't actually place what time, what period it's set in. But certainly the biggest influence on this show is the 1940s, is the original era in which Bob Kane and Bill Finger brought us the Batman character. And we'll get into that more in the next episode. I never have been a fan, though, of the super long bat ears. And it always looks kind of even weirder in animation. But yeah, certainly the 40s style. I get why they've done it, because that's the style they're aping. But when the bat ears are like the length of his face as well, and then up there, I've never been that keen on that style. But hey ho, I know what they're doing, I know why they're doing it, and I still appreciate it. Episode 2 is called "And Be a Villain." So yeah, we've established the world. We're now into it. We can just get on with stories. And we have Harley Quinn in here as a psychologist to Bruce Wayne. Now, obviously, we know who Harleen Quinzel is and who she's going to become. So it's interesting that they start her off in this series without the Joker. It's interesting that, okay, we're going to start with her as a psychiatrist and see what happens there. Be interesting to see how she gets corrupted by the Joker, won't it? Predominantly, this episode focuses on Clayface, on Basil Karlo, the original version of Clayface. Again, 1940s version. This is the Bob Kane, Bill Finger version of Clayface. For anyone who's read those original comic books, if you've read that very first Clayface story where he's taking out actors that he's performing alongside, this really apes that story, and I really liked it. I liked it a lot because of that. Nowadays, people expect Clayface to be this hulking, shape-shifting mass, whereas the original version of the character was just this bent out of shape actor, Basil Karlo, who wore many different faces. So I like their take on it. I like what they do with it. There's a few hints in here. Renee Montoya, who's one of the police officers, and I know they did this in the comic books because that's what they do these days. Like, if you actually read a Batman comic book these days, it seems that there's more like gay and lesbian characters than there are actual straight characters. Sorry, just true. But of course, they bring that here. Montoya is clearly a lesbian in this episode, in this series, and they have a little bit of a flirtatious thing going on with her and Harley Quinn, and I'm just like, great, cool. Episode 3 is Kiss of the Catwoman, and as you can tell from the title, it features Catwoman. So this is again like my favorite costume. My favorite Catwoman costume is the one that we got around the 70s, early 80s period. They kind of have that here, but they mix it with what they had in the 40s as well. And obviously the one we got in the 70s and early 80s It's kind of a rejig of what we got in the 40s. So yeah, that amalgamation of those two styles here, I really like. It's less S&M. Yeah, which, you know, I like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman costumes, got to be said. He doesn't, but yeah, I think I like this one because it's a bit classier. I think, you know, the style we got in the 70s, the 80s. It's just, there's something about that particular costume it's kind of sexy, it's feminine, but classy as well. So I like that they use that here. A slightly different kind of origin story for Catwoman here. We see why she becomes like Catwoman. She becomes a crook essentially because she's becoming destitute. You know, her father was put away, and she comes from money, but all that money has gone because her father squandered it, and now she's like teetering on the edge of just being broke, and she's got to do something about it. And she has a moment of inspiration that sends her down the path of becoming a costumed crook. I like it. I like the interplay between her and Batman. I like that Batman just doesn't bend at all. He's not willing to let some hot woman kind of dictate his behavior. He's on a very particular side of the law, and he's going to stay there like a rock. So yeah, we get that playful kind of nature with Catwoman that you always get in the comic books. And we get that side of Batman where he's just like, yeah, okay, cool, but I'm taking you down. I will say the voices, and again, this is the comparison that it's always going to come in. There's something about the voice work in Batman the Animated Series where, and I don't know if it's just a case of age, like, you know, if I watch this show as many times as I did the Batman the Animated Series, and if it lasts as long or half as long as Batman the Animated Series, are the voices going to kind of sink into my mind as much? But with that show, the voices across the board for each character were so well defined, like so iconic. Like, I can hear them all now. Every character has a very distinctive voice that's so... Like the voice casting on that show is the best voice casting ever, period. And here there's like I can't hear them. You know what I mean? Like if I sit back now and I try and hear the voices, I can hear all the characters from Batman the Animated Series. I can't hear them here from Cape Crusader. I think Bullock is I think that's DiMaggio, John DiMaggio. Yeah, I think John DiMaggio, he does really good Bullock, kind of what I'd expect from Bullock. Again, still not quite as good as the animated series version, but very suitable for the character. Everyone else, I'm just like, yeah, they're good, but like I can't hear them. Sat here right now trying to hear them, I can't hear them. Episode 4 is Night of the Hunters, and this follows Bullock and Flass as they go about their corrupt business. They're trying to usurp Montoya, who's been put in charge of a task force to bring in Batman. But they want to be the ones who go out and do it by their methods and bring in Batman. They want the glory of having brought in Batman. So they do it through nefarious means. They take Firebug, yes, that Firebug, not Firefly, but Firebug, which is quite a deep cut. I know Firebug from the comics. I've only seen him in a story. It was in the late 90s or early 2000s. But he was in a story with Firefly, as it happens. I don't know if he'd been around before that. I'm guessing probably he had. But yeah, a Firebug. They use Firebug to kind of trap Batman. They want to trap Batman using him anyway. So they let him go and make it look like he escaped. I like that relationship there with Bullock and Flass and their dodgy dealings, and the episode itself is pretty pretty strong. It's good, solid episode. I like what I like about it is this element that it's a bit more gritty. It's a bit more down to earth, I would say. They're going more for the law enforcement side of things, the gangster side of things, rather than the colourful costume side of things. Like even Firebug, he's just like, his costume isn't like really colourful and extreme like that, and he is a low rent villain. Like, I mean, purposefully they've used him for the fact that he isn't very well known. He isn't Firefly, and because of that, they can do stuff with him that perhaps they wouldn't have done if it was Firefly they were using. It earns that 13 plus rating. As I say, this isn't for kids. I feel like I wouldn't personally watch this with my kids. My daughter's quite sensitive anyway. Some of this stuff would kind of get to her. And my son is just, he would just try and imitate it all. So keeping away from this stuff. But I'll happily sit there with them and watch Batman the Animated Series. Batman the Animated Series was able to go to dark places, but it kind of straddled that line really well of not slipping so far into the darkness that you're going to traumatise your kids when they're watching it. Episode 5 is The Stress of Her Regard, and this is my least favourite episode of the season. It's when Harleen Quinzel becomes Harley Quinn. No Joker in sight. So they're establishing that basically it's their way of saying that Harley Quinn is her own woman. She becomes, and my trouble with this is that she's in the series before Joker. Really, there is no Harley Quinn before Joker. There is no Harley Quinn without Joker. She is born out of the Joker. She's born out of a fascination with the Joker. And add to that the portrayal of Harley Quinn here is just quite flat. Like, she's not the over-the-top, fun, kind of bubbly, slightly ditzy kind of character that we've come to expect. And I get they're trying something new. They want to do something a bit different. I appreciate that. But if you're going to do that, then you need to pull out all the stops to make it impress, because you're reinventing a character that is so beloved and so iconic that you're on dangerous water. And this is partly my trouble as well with, as I say, with the first episode when they just gender swap Penguin. Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and all that lot from Batman the Animated Series, you invented Harley Quinn, yeah? You invented a female villain that will now last for the ages, that became an instant classic, that was not only so good that she returned in Batman the Animated Series, but was so good she actually made her way into the comic books. She made her way into movies. So you can do it. You can invent new, fresh, female villains without the need to just gender swap. We can't be bothered coming up with a new female villain, so we'll just gender swap one that's been male for 85 years. And then here, as I say, they take one that they did invent for Batman Animated Series and was an absolute classic, and they've just dulled her down. She's quite a boring portrayal of the character, I would say. Very flat in delivery. Like when she puts on the costume, the Harley Quinn costume, the voice drops a few octaves. She's very monotone, and this is more like a psychopath kind of a typical portrayal of a psychopath. It's not what I would expect from. Yeah, what I'm saying is I don't like this version of Harley Quinn. They could have done a lot better, and add to the fact that all the stuff between her and Montoya, where they have a date in this episode, they take the flirtations from the previous episodes and they have a full-on date here, because every show has to have that these days. I'm out. It bugs me. This feels like the woke episode they've got to have in there because every show these days has to have it. It's DEI and all that crap. But yeah, It does nothing for me. I don't like even without all the lesbian stuff. You know, it isn't just about that. Move that aside. They just turn her into a dull character. Particularly in the portrayal, with the way the voice is and all that, and removing her from the Joker so that she is her own woman, that she kind of that she comes onto the scene before Joker. Again, it's just that sniffs a little bit of wokery to me as well. Episode 6 is Night Ride, and the villain of this episode is Gentleman Ghost. Now, when he shows up at the start of this, it kind of feels a little bit Scooby-Doo. Like, is this going to be like a weird costume that he's using with special effects? Obviously, I'm a Batman fan. I know quite a lot of the history, a lot of the villains. I am aware of a villain called Gentleman Ghost. I've never actually read a Batman story with him in. I've seen clips, I've seen like snippets on things, so I knew who this guy was. It's like, it's Gentleman Ghost, but I didn't really know his history. I didn't really know that he is an actual ghost. So yeah, at the start it had this kind of Scooby-Doo vibe about it. And even Batman kind of calls it out and says, this guy is clearly using something like a costume or something like that. And it's like, so I'm like, yeah, obviously. So what's the effect? How is he doing it? Well, no, he is actually a ghost, which, if you know the character from the comic books, isn't a spoiler. But yeah, for me it was a surprise, because I didn't know he is an actual ghost. So once we learn that, and it's no longer a Scooby-Doo type deal where he's going to be unmasked, and I would have gone away with it too if it wasn't for you pesky Batman. Then I kind of I bought into it more, and I'm like, all right, okay, so this is actually Batman dealing with the spiritual realm here. Let's see how he deals with it. And then the episode overall is actually pretty entertaining. It gives us a little kind of back history on Gotham and the elite class and that kind of thing. So and the episode itself is really about the disdain for the poor by those at the top and things like that. It's a solid mystery thriller type episode where we get to see Batman having to confront something he's not only not familiar with, but just doesn't believe in. And it as a result, it introduces a spiritual element into the show, a supernatural, I should say, like a supernatural element into the show. They make it work. And I think it's helped, as I say, by that kind of 40s aesthetic. That really feeds into an idea like this. Episode 7 is called Moving Target, and it's a near perfect episode. The back end of this season gets really good. Now, the only thing that lets it down for me personally, and this probably ain't an issue for most people, but they take the Lord's name in vain twice. They have Barbara. I don't expect to see it or hear it in an animated superhero show that potentially is being watched by kids. Because I know some parents they'll happily let their kids watch 15s, and I know my dad did. My mum not so much. I think she would have rather not, but my dad was like happy for us to watch things like Predator and Terminator at the age of 9. So yeah, I'm not unaware that goes on, and I don't feel like it damaged me all that much. But yeah, it just for me personally, I don't want that. I don't want a character saying Jesus Christ as a swear word when I'm trying to raise my kids in a Christian household. It bothers me. It bugs me. They never used to do that in animated shows. And I know that their excuse would be that, well, it's not really for kids. This is a bit more for an adult audience. But that's fine. But when you see a poster called Batman Caped Crusader and it's got Batman on the front of it, I'm pretty sure most kids are going to want to watch that, and I'm pretty sure most parents, if they don't do their due diligence, will just quite happily let them watch that because it's an animated Batman show. What could go wrong? So yeah, for me, word of warning for those who do care about that stuff. I don't appreciate a character taking the Lord's name in vain twice within the space of 5 minutes. But that aside, everything else that's going on in this episode is great. There is no costumed villain of the... Well, actually there is, but very low key. Very, very low key. There's like a hitman with a team of hitmen, and he's kind of a bit weird. He does have a costume, but yeah, they're sent after Gordon. They're sent after Commissioner Gordon, and basically our team of cops and lawyers and Batman go on the run. Basically, they have to try and protect Gordon, and that's it. That's what the episode is about. Who's sent these hitmen? Why have they sent these hitmen? How can they stop these hitmen? And it's just a thoroughly entertaining, very well written for the most part, episode that kind of is the first time that I truly get to see the potential of this show, where I'm like, okay, all right, I'm digging this. We get more episodes like this, then this could be something quite special. Episode 8 is called Nocturna, which features the villain Nocturna, which, yeah, is this young girl who sucks the life force out of people, and yeah, so we go to a carnival, a travelling carnival, and we see these young kids, Dickie and Jason, Hello Robbins, and even one called Carrie, as in Carrie Kelly. All the kid Robins, basically all the Robins, well, not quite all, we're missing a few. There's been considerable amount of Robins over the years now, but you know, your big hitters, Carrie Kelly, Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, they're there as these kids that we never... Yeah, it's a bit of a strange episode because they're there, but we don't get the kind of tragedies happening to them that would make them Robin in that regard. Again, we have... You could argue that the two lads get taken down by Nocturna, but Carrie Kelly, she manages to put up a good fight. Is that wokery? I don't know. It's, propping the female characters up at the expense of the male characters. I'm sure some people would argue that, but whatever. The problem is that when we watch stuff these days, we've always got that lens on because it's pushed so much. It's like we can't help but see it, even in places where previously we probably wouldn't have. The episode itself it's pretty good, but it kind of feels like it's an episode of references. We've got, hey, this is Dick Grayson. Oh, and like at the start you feel like, oh, this is going to be the Robin episode. This is going to be the episode that's going to show us how Dick Grayson becomes Robin. And then Dick Grayson's kind of sidelined, and then we got Jason Todd, and it's like, okay, so are we having Jason? Is Jason Todd going to be Robin in this instead of Dick Grayson? And then Carrie Kelly comes along, and you're like, okay, all right. I don't think this episode is going to show us how any of them become Robin. This is just like reference it. I think it's a way of having them in there, but not having them in there. Not having Robin. My guess is we're not going to get a Robin in this show. I think it's going to be solo Batman, but I think it's Bruce Timm and the team's way of saying, nod, wink, wink. They're out there somewhere, but this is all you're going to get. I don't know. They might bring them back later, but it's an interesting way about going things. But the villain, Nocturna herself, is quite a cool villain. It's quite creepy. There's a lot of other stuff going on in the sidelines with Harvey Dent, because they're really building now towards Harvey Dent's kind of big finale of the season. Another character that we get introduced to here is Leslie Tompkins, who, a bit of a fan favourite. I like Leslie Tompkins. I've always liked how she anchors Bruce. It helps that she... Certainly in some iterations that I've seen of her, she's a believer. She's a woman of faith who that anchors her into doing the right thing and looking out for people, even people that society would say no, they deserve punishment and that. She's always been a bit of a Mother Teresa type character in the Batman mythos. And having her in Bruce's life in many ways helps to keep him grounded, helps to stop him going completely off the rails. So yeah, I like that they bring her in at this point with this. Yeah, she's taking like a school bus full of orphans to see the carnival. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on there that's not necessarily integral to the overall series. A lot of it is just kind of winks and nods, but it's enjoyable nonetheless. And the story itself around this Nocturna character is very well put together. Episode 9 is the first of a 2-part finale that kind of wraps up this season. It's called The Killer Inside Me, and it's all about the fall of Harvey Dent into Two-Face. So we the end of the previous episode, we get the famous acid in the face. That's kind of how it ends. And here it's like, okay, where do we find Harvey Dent a few weeks later? What's happening to him psychologically? Again, the comparison has to be made to Batman the Animated Series, not least of which the reason being the introduction of Two-Face in Batman the Animated Series was done in a 2-part story. So it's like, yeah, I feel like, okay, let's take this 2-parter and measure it alongside that 2-parter. And I think that they do a really good job of making it different, but still kind of keeping those elements of what really makes Two-Face Two-Face. I think the animated series version kind of delved a lot more into the psychosis of Bruce Wayne, Batman, and how he felt about not doing enough to have saved Harvey from going down that line, and he tries to do a lot to rescue him, so to speak. I think the Batman here that we get in Cape Crusader is a bit more out of touch with his emotions. He is very much, the ends justify the means kind of thing. And he is partly responsible here for Harvey going off the deep end. And it takes him quite a while, really, to acknowledge that. And I'm not saying that's good or bad in comparison to Batman the Animated Series. It's just different, and I kind of like it. This is what I said earlier about Harley Quinn. If you're going to do it differently, then you need to make it its own thing in a really good way, and I think they do that here. They take a different approach to Batman the Animated Series, and it works for this style of show, for who Batman is in this show. It works really well. Harvey's Two-Face persona comes out as a direct result of literally being split in two, of the acid. Like in the animated series, he already had a previous history with psychosis, with split personality, with Big Bad Harv, and that's something that he tried to bury, that Rupert Thorne used against him. Whereas they don't have that in this show. It's all a direct result of the acid burn on the face. Again, it's neither better nor worse. It's just different. I like it. I like what they do here. And this episode, actually, all across the board, is fantastic. And I will say that these final 2 episodes are easily the best of the show. So the show goes out with a bang. I'll say that much. It becomes this kind of revenge story. The first part, at any rate, is a revenge story in which Two-Face kind of emerges and decides, screw it, Rupert Thorne and his men did this to me. It's time for payback. And how Two-Face goes about getting that revenge. Again, a bit more hard-hitting than Batman the Animated Series, because in this show they are willing to kill people. And they're willing to do it in some fairly gruesome ways, to be honest. Someone gets burnt to death in this episode. So, they don't shy away from that stuff. So again, if you're thinking about watching this with your kids, just bear in mind, show some caution. So the final episode of the season is called Savage Night, and it's basically it's everyone trying to keep Two-Face safe, Harvey, Two-Face. So like again, we're in this grey area where Harvey's kind of trying to come through, but Two-Face is always still there in the background. Which one's going to win out? And like on top of all that, you've got Rupert Thorne's men kind of descending upon him in response to his vengeance in the previous episode. So then it becomes this thing a little bit like with the Moving Target episode where they were all trying to keep Gordon safe. It's a little bit like that where now everyone's trying to keep Harvey Dent safe. As with the first part of this episode, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's this show at its best so far, and it doesn't really put a foot wrong for me. I like how they explore morality through Two-Face, which is, he's a perfect character to do that with, because he's, one half good, one half bad. Do you need both those elements, or do you need to extinguish one at the expense of another? Where does morality fit in with the toss of a coin? Is morality just some arbitrary thing? So yeah, I like the character of Two-Face in exploring those issues, and it's just a kick-ass finale, which is very action-packed, which has some surprises. There are certain characters that get taken out in certain ways where you don't expect it, because it's like, oh, okay, are you genuinely going to take them out? And this, that, and the other. So whether or not that remains so in the next season, we'll see. But yeah, so the episode kind of ends on a bit of a stinger, a calling card for next season as to what's to come. I think most people would probably guess as to who that involves. This being the Batman mythos, and given which characters haven't appeared yet, but it's nice to see, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of certain stories that I've read, particularly from the 40s, or say like Dennis O'Neill's Images story from Legends of the Dark Knight 50. It's got that kind of vibe about it. So yeah, like I say, overall, I liked this. I liked Batman the Caped Crusader. I think there's certain elements in it that touch a little bit too much on the woke side of things. I think any show you go into these days, it's going to have that. It's just something we've got to deal with these days with modern TV. It seems unavoidable. I can't see it going away anytime soon. So the degree of wokery, I'm going to have a new score. In my reviews, I'm going to have a new score. Just how woke is it? I would give this a 2-star wokery score. I think for the most part they avoid it, but there are a couple of times when it's like, really? You needed to do that, did you? But that aside, the show's really good. Is it on a par with Batman the Animated Series? At this point, no, it's not. But as a modern day take, modern day animated show about Batman, I will definitely be coming back for season 2, especially on the strength of the back half of this season. So yeah, there you go. That is my take on Batman the Caped Crusader. But where do you stand on it? Have you seen it? What did you think about it? What is your favourite episode of the season? What is your least favourite episode of the season? Leave your comments down below. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.